approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? All right, that's passed unanimously. Next item on the agenda, we're going to do our general session update, starting up with housing, and then we'll get back down to gravel pits at some point. So, you ready?
Hey, Justin, do you want to do the check-in piece here?
All right, hello everybody, welcome. Good news, this is the second to last Monday we have in the session. Next week, do not come to LPC on Monday. It's President's Day. We will not be here. If you come to this room, you'll be very lonely. But feel free to take positions on any bills by yourself while you're here. So next Tuesday, we will have the LPC. We've got 3 weeks left and just want to give you a little bit of the lay of the land where things are at. So right now we're tracking 211 bills. There are 824 bills / resolutions numbered. 933 total numbered last year. We are tracking a quarter of the bills that are out there, which is about par for the course for us. That's where we usually end up landing. They finished the appropriations work last week. So if you track the legislative process, because you're a nerd like us, the first half, thanks, Mike. The first half of the session, they do a lot of morning committees, and that's the appropriation subcommittees, where they look for all the requests for appropriations. They prioritize things for the budget. And we had fewer, what I'll call policy-related committee hearings. This week, we're having a lot more of those. We had committee hearings this morning. We'll have committee hearings this afternoon. And later in the week, Thursday and Friday, you're going to start seeing a lot more floor time. So on Thursday and Friday, once they hit the floor at 10 o'clock, other than lunch, that's where they're going to be until 5 o'clock. So if you're wondering why aren't bills moving so quickly or how on earth are they going to pass 500 bills in the next 3 weeks, it's because they're going to start having a lot more committee floor time. They're going to have committee and floor time, excuse me. Things are going to be moving a lot more quickly. So for you, what that means is we may be sending out action alerts. We may be having quick updates. We may need very quick turnaround on feedback on some things. So I know you've been ignoring our emails so far. Just kidding, you're not. But if you have been, for the next 2.5 weeks, pay attention because things are going to move very fast and furious. We're going to need feedback very quickly on things, and we may need you reaching out on bills very quickly as well. So watch for that. There's a handful of bills still on the bill tracker because we are adding new bills still every day that we don't have positions yet on. But if those bills are there, they're still in the rules committee. They haven't been assigned to a committee. So we'll keep having staff suggestion positions on that, but things will move quickly. We will ratify the bill tracker at the end of the committee, but also just want to let you know, if you're looking at the bill tracker and you say, you know what, I'm just making up a number here, HB 600, heaven forbid we ever get there. And I see that on HB 600, you're a neutral, we really should be supporting that, or we really need to oppose that. Please don't hesitate to reach out first and let us know that. If there's a reason we need to change a position, we want to make sure we get those in the right place. So please be in contact. Please pay attention. A lot of things moving. And with that, our favorite topic, housing and land use.
Thank you, Justin. Good afternoon, everybody. And let me give a glass half full presentation of what today means. As Justin indicated, next Monday is President's Day. And next Monday does not count in the legislative calendar. So we have 46 days for a 45-day session. Now, for most of us, next Monday, even though the Capitol is closed, it's still a work day, but we just don't have to come to the Capitol, which means the following Monday is really the last Monday morning left of the session. So that's the good news. We only have one Monday morning left of the session. Thank you, Lynn, for the applause there. The bad news is we still have 13 and a half business days, which is an eternity up here. And as Justin indicated, things are going to be moving fast and furious this week. So LPC will be next Tuesday rather than next Monday. The other thing I'll just add to what Justin was just describing is that we as staff actually have 2 standing meetings every day. We have our briefing in the morning and our roundup in the evening. So anytime new bills pop up, we're reviewing those bills. And then many of your cities have different staffers that are up here on the Hill on a regular basis, or they tune into our briefing call each morning. So in between LPCs, we rely on those 2 meetings a day to make sure we're staying on top of all those moving pieces. So if a bill comes out this afternoon and you say, oh, it's not on the league's tracker yet, but I want to make sure the league's aware of it and either support it or oppose, make sure you send it over to us and we'll fill it into our system, because things are going to be crazy here over the next couple of weeks. We also will have Steve Waldrop joining us here in just a few minutes. So we're going to start into the housing and land use space. And then when he gets here, we'll turn the time over to him as a follow-up to the conversation that we started here in LPC 2 weeks ago. Many of you remember when he was up here whiteboarding away on the potential legislation around the Public Treasurer's Investment Fund. That legislation is likely to be public in the next couple of days. So we invited him to come back and give an update on where that discussion is. In addition to that piece, House Bill 289, which we spent a lot of time discussing here at LPC the last couple of weeks, has now been amended twice, in large part because of the pushback from league membership. They haven't outright killed the bill, but they've amended it twice, trying to figure out if there's some sort of middle ground. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jared Tingey to talk through 289, and then I'll come back to hit the other housing and land use bills. And then when Steve Waldrop gets here, we'll just pause and pivot to him.
Okay. So I don't want to reiterate what Cam said. So I'm just going to go to this slide here and just talk a little bit about the original bill 289 and what the second substitute does. You'll notice on the reasonable attorney's fees, nothing changes from the beginning or from the original bill to the second substitute, which was substituted on the floor by Representative Lubay. It does do some things that move the from very bad to slightly less than very bad. On the consequential damages here, you'll see that on the original, it was if you lose in district court after an unfavorable property rights ombudsman advisory opinion, that it didn't matter whether or not there was any sort of standard as far as any sort of bad faith. If you lost in district court, the court would be required to award consequential damages. The substitute, what that does is it adds a standard that they have to prove that a city knowingly and intentionally violated the law. And if they did that, then the court is required to award consequential damages. Nothing changes on the last part of that from the original bill to the substitute with the fine of $250 per day. So the main difference here is adding the standard to the consequential damages portion of that bill. The reason this is important and we want you to be aware of it is because we're going to ask one Slido question, I think, on this one. As far as, does this change anything for you and where does that put you as far as consequential damages? And the second substitute, as far as what other bills might be important to push back on, and in relation to this or other bills and whatnot. So you can do it now, whatever, whichever at the last or start syncing while you keep explaining it. Yeah. And just to give you a kind of a background, like Cam said, there's been two substitutes. This is a second substitute. From the legislators' point of view, this is a compromise. This is a better alternative to what it started as. And so, are you wanting to?
I just want to make one comment on it.
Okay.
So I think some of this, part of the question here, while you're all logging into Slido, is this is part of a bigger conversation at this point in the session, is where's our political capital at? And how much political capital do we want to expend on this bill. If we decide we still hate this and it's a high opposed and we're going to expend capital on it, means we're not expending quite as much capital in some other places. So this is all part of the calculation of if it's in a place where we don't like it, but we oppose it, but we're a low opposed, we're not going to spend a ton of capital on it. We'll go to committee and speak against it. We'll share letters that we have, but we're not going to blow up the entire Senate floor on it. If it's a high opposed, then we're blowing up the whole Senate floor on this the whole way. But then we need to calculate, what does that mean for other bills? As much as we would like to, we cannot blow up full all out every single bill all the time. We'd like to, it just doesn't ultimately work. They stop listening at some point. So that's part of this question. Part of the political calculus we need to have is, in relation to the bills, where are things at? Now, we're not at the point where we say, if we're high opposed on this bill, we therefore need to be low opposed on other bill. But we need to start thinking about how much capital do we have on things and where do we spend that time and capital. So that's part of the reason we're asking the question. So we're not saying that to say nobody should be high opposed on things. We're just saying it as we're making calculations about where we spend our time and effort and capital, we need to figure out which ones are the highest priority right now. So that's where the questions are coming from.
That's it.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay, I think we can ask the question, Carson. So again, so our question on this one, 289 as amended, which means reasonable attorney fees and consequential damages if a judge finds the party intentionally and knowingly violated the law. Is this a high priority given the amendment where it's currently at, a low priority or a medium priority, or are you just at no level of opposition at this point? Why are you laughing, Tony? Thank you.
We're
giving you options. We don't want to take away
question.
someone's ability to not be opposed. I'll judge you for it, but
Justin, we have a question online. I'm just gonna give.
yeah.
I'll let you read it. I crushed my glasses this past week.
Wait.
And the second pair from Smith's and the third pair. So
that was my question, Jared. How many glasses have you crushed in the last week?
That was not the.
That's how rough the
question.
session is. Jared has lost 3 pairs of glasses that have broken in the last week. That's how much he's reading.
Sorry, Jared, to out you on that. The question from Cliff online is, how often do cities get hit with the wrong end of this issue?
That's a good question.
Well, I haven't done any legal research as far as that standard is concerned, but I think I think you should go to your city attorney, and ask them. But as far as the standard is concerned, I think that it would be a very difficult standard to prove, unknowingly and intentionally violating the law. That would mean, of course, there are Facebook posts and there are emails that float around that would be beautiful for the other side to use. So if that's a risk that you think your city would have, then it very well may be a high risk that, you know what, we don't care what the law says, and so we're going to not. So I think it depends on each city. And but as far as that standard is concerned, I think that's a difficult standard to show. And as far as the $250 per day that has the same standard, that has never been used or imposed. So if that's any indication.
So if I can, so it's a really high standard.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Knowingly and intentionally.
It's a very high standard. That was my short, not attorney speak. I didn't hedge it all.
I was going to say, yep.
All right, Carson, do we have enough responses on this one to move on? Okay. Thank you all for response on that one. We'll move on to other topics. Let Carson move back. So Cam, I think, well, no, are we doing 85 next? Yeah. So this one's yours, I think.
Oh,
Okay. So everybody please keep Slido open. We're going to keep asking a couple, I think we have 3 or 4 more questions. So we'll just hit them by topic. So keep it open on your phone or computer if you have it. Otherwise, you can just rejoin. So the next bill we have is Senate Bill 185, which is Senator Vickers' residential building and inspection amendments. Going to get back to the slideshow here. So there's a number of provisions in this bill. Really, the one that we're focused on is provision that requires your building official to accept a report from a private inspector verifying that the inspection has been completed and the residence meets the requirements. So in essence, what this does is it allows a permit holder to contract directly with a building inspector and allows that third-party inspection. Now, under current law, municipalities and local governments have 3 days that you can either perform the inspection within 3 days in-house, or you can contract directly with a third party. Either way, you are still the one who that inspector is holding and responsible to. The concern that's been expressed over the years has been, because this is a recurring issue, the concern that's been expressed over the years is the concern about a conflict of interest and whether the inspector is whether their focus is on who they're accountable to. Really, that's the question. Like I don't think we're trying to suggest that private inspectors would do a better or worse job. Just it's the optics and the concern about conflict. Now we've in past years surveyed how often local governments are hitting that 3-day deadline, and we found the majority of local governments are able to perform inspections within 3 days, or they go to the third party. And we quickly, I want to thank Seth Perrins, I thought I saw him somewhere. We quickly performed a survey with the City Managers Association this year, and again found that 99.6% of inspections are performed within 48 business hours of the requested date. So we don't think it's a problem in the majority of cases. What we've heard from some of the proponents of this legislation is that there's some inspectors that are difficult to work with and quote unquote bad actors. And so we're going to try to figure out how to either thread the needle or just oppose this outright. But we want to get your feedback really quickly again on how much of a priority this is to oppose. So I'm going to switch back to Slido here. We're going to ask the next question, which is, as drafted, is SB 185 a high priority to oppose, a medium priority to oppose, or a low priority to oppose? Or maybe it's not a problem for your jurisdiction at all. So again, we just want to take your temperature, see the policy committee has given us guidance last Monday to oppose this bill, but we want to see how much of a concern this is. Other questions online? I should add that we're keeping these results internal because we don't want anybody, we want these to be honest answers. We don't want anybody to be pressured by your colleagues. We want to know how you really feel. So we'll be sharing these responses with only the league officers as we have conversations about political capital allocation, trying to figure out, we've got a lot of big concerning bills coming forth. How do we divide and conquer our resources? Mark, we'll let you make the impassioned speech. No, in all seriousness, we've heard concerns. We just are trying to assess how everybody feels, not necessarily in your position, but in the magnitude of your position. Okay, great. Well, I will turn this back over to. Oh yeah, we actually do. Thank you for reminding me. Sorry, one more Slido question. We're meeting with a small group of people to try to navigate this issue. But we wanted to ask, again, if we've heard from a number of stakeholders, not just people in the home building community, but a number of stakeholders have said they think there are some quote unquote bad actors out there. So we want to open the floor. If you have suggestions on how you think the process could be better, maybe that's maybe better for the city side too. For example, we know that delays are often caused by a inspector going to a site and then the project's not ready to be inspected yet. So, I think if there's any ideas for the process to be improved upon, we're happy to hear that too. Yeah.
Thank you, Carson. John Hiskey from Taylorsville. We did experience a situation where such a delay was professed against the inspection process. However, we were not part of being notified of that. Had Cameron not notified me coming out of a session, we would not have known about it. When I got back to the city, it was quite a contrary story. And our city manager invested several hours of time going through the requirements and ordinance. I mean, 12, 13 pages, work through it. In the middle of that, the developer asks for a favor and wants to be able to switch a building. After that, they pull the foundation 5 feet off of, nothing to do with the building inspector. I'm concerned, and maybe I'm overstating it. We have taken heat from leadership, from the governor's office relative to cities. I say this carefully, but is there not a process where we can come together at times like this and not try to spread this to everyone? We sat down, our people dedicated the time, and it worked out. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. And I think that's how the majority of these issues are usually resolved. And what we've been kind of hearing is quote unquote bad actions are in the eye of the beholder. So oftentimes there's two sides to the story, and one inspector who's doing a very thorough job might be another person's bad actor, or a missed email or some confusion might become a anecdote. So again, we don't want anecdotes to drive policy, but there's an opportunity here to try to improve the process. We're going to see if that's possible. Not that this bill is an improvement to the process, but if we're already looking at code, and I think Senator Vickers is just interested in making improvements overall. So we want your feedback.
Sean Guzman, St. George, and Senator Vickers is one of our senators, and he's a very reasonable person. I visited with him this weekend about this bill. There's a lot of good comments coming through, by the way. Oh my gosh, I forgot Hess's first name, but it's Scott. And Scott has a good comment in there, and so do others, but his is about those that aren't ready for inspections. We are short inspectors, and people have I've noticed that there's been some notes in here to help us find inspectors. We've been in short of inspectors in St. George as well. And what's frustrating is we get developers, builders who will call us for an inspection, and we get out there and they're not ready, but they wanted to be in the queue and they were hoping to be ready. That just slows us down. Every year we face bills where we're getting in the offer to say, let's penalize the bad actors on the development community for what they're doing too, because they're causing us delays and they're causing us personnel issues too. Now, right now, currently, and I'm not sure that when we visited with Senator Vickers last week that he understood this, but we currently have the ability, and a lot of us are doing that, to contract with a third party. And I think that needs to stay that way, because when we contract with that third party, they feel more beholden to us to make sure that they do an honest inspection and an unbiased inspection. If they're being paid for by the builder, I don't think it's going to be the case. So, and I think that's also been noted in here too. But again, I think that Senator Vickers will be reasonable working with us, but it sure would be great if we could have some recognition on the development side that their bad actors are hurting their good actors by causing delays for us when they are not ready for an inspection.
Justin, can you see if there's any questions on Zoom really quick before we wrap this one up? Okay, great. Well, again, thank you all for the feedback. We'll keep working on this issue and we'll keep you apprised. We're meeting with a small group to try to figure out how to navigate this. And yeah, we'll keep you posted as we go forward. Again, we're leagues opposed as written, so we'll keep moving from there with your direction.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for the feedback. As Carson indicated, we'll be reviewing that feedback with the officers, and then later today, we're sitting down with a small group of attorneys and managers and others to work through 185. That's why we did that open-ended question a moment ago, to see if there are potential alternatives that could work. Literally 10 minutes ago, I was talking to Senator Vickers in the hallway, and he wanted me to express again to the group. He wants to work with cities. He's interested in trying to improve the process and wants to hear back from us about both the bill as drafted and potential alternatives to it. Okay, so let's now pivot to the housing pieces. We're going to take these in a slightly different order. We're going to jump down to 2E, which is the housing updates, and then I'll come back to House Bill 465 and House Bill 476 after we get done with those. We showed this slide last week. There's been a lot of discussion up here around missing middle type housing, a variety of housing types, small lots, parking minimums, parking planning, etc. The Parking Modernization Guidebook came out last fall and is certainly worth a deep dive. This was in the Salt Lake Tribune last week. We pay for access, so you don't have to, but the quotes here are important. This was what President Adams said during media availability last week. You can see this, I didn't actually put the date, but just take my word for it, it was last week. So President Adams said, quote, "It felt to me like previous to last session, we've been focusing on getting people into apartments and focusing on multifamily zoning, trying to get additional densities in cities. It felt to me like we'd lost the focus on the American dream, and that is actually home ownership." Then later in the article, it stated that as interest rates lower, President Adams believes demand for the first-time homebuyers program will grow. Quote, "He's hoping that cities will allow for smaller lots for the product line that allows people to get into a first home at that lower price point." So again, another reference to the smaller lots piece. Now, the good news is that we've been able to bring back a lot of data about the number of small lots that local governments have zoned for in recent years, and also bring back the mixed bag of how many of those small lots have resulted in larger homes that are not really affordable. That data piece has been really central to the overall conversation. You've seen this slide all session of rumbling number one, which is similar to House Bill 306. Some of the ideas that were on the table as recently as end of January, and then the rumbling 5, which is what the league board had tasked us with on Local Officials Day to come up with alternatives to land use preemption that would still be meaningful in trying to plan for a variety of housing types and focus on affordable home ownership. So with that being said, as of, what day is today? February 12th at 12:29 p.m. This is what the housing equation is starting to look like, recognizing that this could change 5 minutes from now when another bill drops. The first piece is the modular housing bill that we presented to you last week that was negotiated for months through the Commission on Housing Affordability to facilitate the use of modular housing and offsite construction. That's SB 168. The second piece of this is House Bill 13, which Representative Dunnigan presented to this body earlier this session. And then the PTIF concept, which I'll turn the time over to Steve Waldrop momentarily to update you on. And then what we are calling now the FIZ, the First Home Investment Zone, which I'll be presenting on after Steve finishes speaking. And then process updates and improvements, which we'll be presenting momentarily at House Bill 465 and House Bill 476. So overall, all of those bills are very much in the stretch space. There are things that certainly will force local governments to stretch, but they also all are in the partnership space rather than the preemption space. So as of now, 12/31, that's what the equation is looking like, with the caveat that there are still plenty of bad bills out there or potential bills that could still come. So with that being said, I mentioned that we need to talk 465 and 476, but we're going to jump right now to the proposed PTIF bill, which still has not yet been numbered, but should be numbered soon. And I want to introduce and welcome back to the group Steve Waldrop, who is Governor Cox's senior advisor for housing policy and innovation. Did I get it right? Enough? That works. That works. Steve presented 2 weeks ago when this idea was still in its relative genesis. There have been a tremendous amount of meetings and dialogue since he presented to LPC 2 weeks ago. So Steve, thank you very much for coming back to provide an update to the group. Time is yours.
Is there a mechanism for revoking his membership? do this. Oh, yeah, you know what? That's great. Thank you. Much more comfortable. No, thank you again for all the work you guys have done. You've got great leadership. I'll just say that your leadership, both on the professional side with Cameron and his team and your executive board, are phenomenal. And you guys should be very proud of the work that they do in working through really, really difficult issues over and over and over and over again. Seems like we keep coming back to the same space, right? So since we last met, we've been working on this concept of creating a liquidity fund around housing starts. And I will pull out one piece of paper. This paper right here, many of you have seen this. Cameron has this, but this is housing starts from 2000 until now. And you can see we're here. So we have a critical issue in that we are not building housing that you guys are entitling. And as Cameron mentioned, entitling small lots does not mean affordable housing or even attainable housing. Entitling small lots means that builders are still going to attempt to maximize their profit, which again, that's their job. You don't expect them to do anything different. So what we've done is try to create something where, hello, off and on, where we're asking everybody to kind of meet in the center. We're asking builders to give. We're asking our municipalities to come to the table. We're asking the banking community and the lending community through banks and credit unions to come to the table and figure out how we can reverse this drop in housing production before it gets worse. If we do nothing, the process is pretty clear. This trend is pretty well defined. We drop, then there's a demand bumps up. Don't know. And then we start catching up. We start catching up after prices increase, because that's when builders start building again. And that creates an even worse situation than we have right now with housing affordability. So what we're proposing is that we take a chunk of the PTIF money, and we're looking at $300 million tranches up to $1 billion, making it available to lenders by application. So they would apply when they receive a qualifying application from a developer or builder. That qualifying application requires the developer builder to do a couple of things. Number one, they have to commit to building 60% of whatever they're getting money for as attainable housing at a fixed sale price. We're looking at those numbers, and it'll vary by county. We'll probably end up with, I think, 5 tranches depending on the counties. But the overall target is $350,000 minus, so that we can have homes that are affordable to our teachers, our police officers, our civil workers, our people that are just getting out of college, engineers, people that are just hitting the job market, or those who have been saving for a number of years and the housing market has gotten further and further away from them. That's our target. With those homes, they are required to be deed restricted for owner occupancy. So they cannot be sold to an institution. They can't be rented out. We're working on, there is one thing, and I'll need to get a little feedback, and we'll have Cameron talk with you guys about this. We did have a question. If somebody develops a lot of spec and they have a carry period of, up to maybe 6 to 12 months where they have to bridge, while they're waiting for people to do take up, that'll, if we have a short rental period, kind of puzzling through that. That was presented today. It would allow them to build more spec and get more mass into the market quicker. And this would allow them to sort of de-risk that spec home building. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. I understand the concept. I'm not sure if that works in practice. So we're going to talk through that. Those are kind of, you know, some of the things like that that come up as we go through these processes. But we want them to be owner occupied, and we want them to be in your communities. And then we want the other 40% to be governed by whatever you as the community leaders and the developers agree to. So that you have mixed income, blended communities, blended development, so we're not doing just one product and nothing else. What this requires, though, from our communities is the developers are going to come to you and say, look, in order to make this pencil, I want to build, they're going to have to build 1,000, 1,100 square foot detached single family homes. If that's the case, they're going to have to build some towns. I mean, they're going to have to build what fits that financial model. You're going to have to work with them to determine what works in your communities. And we're not, the state's not going to have a part in that. That's your job. That's the lender's job. That's the builder. That process already exists. We want the processes that already exist to continue to work. The lender then brings this qualifying project. It fits in the box. And then the state treasurer kicks out up to 75% of the project costs at a 3.5% return. So we're looking at Fed funds rate -2 right now is kind of our target. Fed funds rate is 5.5. So we're looking about a 3.5 loan, and then allowing the lender to charge a spread of 350 basis points. So you'd end up with money right now, it'd be a little under 7% money. You know, as that Fed fund rates fluctuates, it would fluctuate a little bit. Likelihood is it's going to drop in the near future. So you may end up getting 6.5% money, something like that. So the key for the developer is that they get affordable money, and they have to work with you to determine what works to build that target product for your community. And then it's the normal process. One of the other things that I want to talk about, we still need to work through a little bit on the owner occupancy piece. There are some communities where the initial owner occupancy won't be enough, because long-term, there's going to be pressure to convert all those to rentals. And so there may be some communities where we want to do a longer tail on that owner occupancy requirement. And that's something, you know, that we want feedback from the communities, the cities and counties on where that would be appropriate and how we implement that. Because again, the goal is to create long-term community stability and housing for the people that we want to have in our communities as full participants in our communities. One other piece that we've talked about, and again, this is something Cam hasn't heard about either, I don't think, is do we do a set aside for those communities that they can offer it on a kind of a first right to some of their employees? Have we talked about that? Okay, well, good for me. That's another concept we want to work with you guys on. Is does it make sense to say, you know, I don't know what the percentage is, but some percentage so that there's the opportunity for the municipality to say, hey, we want to prioritize these specific job classifications. You probably, you know, can't target individuals, but you could do job classifications and still maintain the Fair Housing Act rules. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We're planning on a 3-year sunset. So the money would outflow for 3 years and then up to 2 years to have it come back in. So the net time frame on this we're looking at is 5 years. We're hoping that this is a short-term solution, that the markets will kind of self-regulate and we'll get back to a better market condition. This is not intended to be a long-term program if we don't need it. But right now, we need to do something, or we are going to have a situation that none of us want. And we have the opportunity, I think, to do something very creative, something very meaningful and impactful in Utah that will achieve the goals that I think we share, which is to create attainable housing for the people that we want to have stay in our communities, live in our communities. I could ask by a raise of hands how many have people living in their basement right now. or how many know someone who's living in the basement. That's probably everybody here. We have a lot of young people and a lot of people who have been renting for a very long time, saving money, thinking that they were going to buy housing, and they're nurses and they're people who are, they've done everything right. This is the frustration to me. We now have a situation where people who have done everything right no longer have a gateway into the system. And that's what we have to attack. And that's the goal of this. So my hope and goal is that this group here will take that challenge on to say, yeah, we're going to go out and meet with our developers, be proactive. Say, hey, I know we have this project right here. We want to turn this project into what we want to see in our community with this program. We'd love to facilitate those meetings, be a part of those meetings, help with anything like that in your communities, because that is the governor's goal. And it's frankly the best thing that we can do for the young people and the working people in our state. Cam, does that cover it? Questions?
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. As I noted before Steve started speaking, the bill is not yet numbered, not yet finished drafting, but it is coming. So inevitably, there are going to be a ton of questions about it once the drafting is done. Yep, go ahead.
One of the questions that came up is, what is the cost if we use general PTIF money and we have money from various entities in that? What is the cost to those entities? It's about $770 per million on kind of foregone interest. If you do the calculation, the money coming back into the system, again, if the projects are in your community, obviously they'll have much more direct impact, but the feedback loop into the system from a construction project, from wages, and then on the tail end, property taxes is significantly more than that.
Steve, Kate Bradshaw, Bountiful. I have a question for you. On 2B, you have the owner occupancy requirements, but I'm curious if you can share any more details with us about whether they'd be deed restricted, and then who would manage the deed restrictions. The municipalities, if the lending is coming through the bank, may not know that these projects are happening. So would the municipality manage a deed restriction if that's going to be the path, or would there be some third-party entity created that would oversee that deed restriction to ensure that they were owner occupied?
I think the thought is on the initial deed restriction, and they will be deed restricted. The deed restriction is going to be the requirement. So the initial deed restriction, we would want to engage the municipality in that with the C of O. So the C of O is issued and there's the deed restriction is in place, and that's that process. Now, when we talk about a longer tail on these, that's a different discussion. And I don't have the answer to that. But on the initial one, I think it makes sense to have the city involved on that initial deed restriction to make sure that it's owner occupied upon issuance of the C of O. Does that make sense? But I'm open to feedback because I don't know everything.
Sean Guzman, St. George City. Steve, what I'm wondering about on the deed restrictions, and I understand that you're saying you'd work with the municipalities on how long it would be owner occupied and whether it be a rental. In St. George, we have a unique situation. We have over 5 million visitors just as Zion alone, millions more doing others, a lot of short-term rentals. We would want a permanent prohibition for use as a short-term rental, so that even if it is in this part where it could be the years where it could be rented, at least it's being rented to a resident that's living there that needs a place to live, would be my first comment. And the second one is—
To me, that's great. Amen.
Great. Your second comment is that I've already been contacted by my finance officer as soon as he saw your PTIF proposal. And I'm wondering, has Marlo, has he weighed in on this? If we get the state treasurer, I think, to put out a white sheet that explains this and the minimal impact, I think a lot of the Officers Association would feel a little more comfortable with that.
We've been meeting with Marlo for the past week and his team. He's got 5 people we've been meeting with. They're fully engaged in this process. We're working with them right now and trying to work out the parameters of what this all looks like. So yes, we're in that process and that will be forthcoming.
So a statement from—
Yes. Yeah.
Let's do one more question. Let's go to Councilmember Smith Edmondson, and then I'll wrap it.
I'll be quick. I have actually 2 questions, but the first one is, You're talking about ensuring that the folks that need these affordable housing units will be able to get into them. Was that the idea behind allowing the municipalities to kind of maybe put in a job classification? Because there are people in all ranges of any of these jobs you mentioned who traditionally from affordable housing, they may not qualify. People who make more money, who are in a certain classification, who are still getting into a job or a house that costs $350, but then you have someone who has a lower level of pay, same classification, who can't get into it. So what is the mechanism to make sure that the people who really need it are getting it? And then my second question, you don't have to answer that yet. Second question is on the 40%. So you have your 60% that has this limit, and then you have 40% in the same community that does not have that limit. Is the expectation that that 40% is a different type of house? Because expressing to folks that 60% of the people in the neighborhood are going to be able to have this home for $350, but these other 40% are going to have it for $550, that's not going to sit well. So is that the idea behind working with the municipality to have some other types of homes in that 40%? Because I see the same type of housing, different pricing will have an issue. That will be an impact negatively.
No, I get where you're coming from. So let me clarify. So on the first part, we haven't contemplated any income restriction on this. I think that's why, you know, when I talk about what would the cities like to do as far as carving out some spaces for employees or job classifications. I mean, they don't have to necessarily, teachers aren't city employees, but you could have job classification carve outs where you kind of set that expectation. I don't think we want to, as a state in this program, take a very heavy hand in mandating AMI requirements or anything like that, because the monitoring of that becomes a whole separate world that we would have to open up. As far as the type of homes and the cost of homes, these are not subsidized units. So in order for a developer to want to build a $350,000 home, they're gonna have to build a smaller home. And so that's on a smaller lot. That's what will drive that. So that really becomes a market priced home at that time based on what the market can afford. The other product that they will build won't be that same product for $450 because no one would buy that. Who would buy that for $450? You know, it will, the other 40% will be basically determined by the land use authority and whatever you guys come up with as you work through that development agreement. I'm assuming most of these are going to end up being part of a development agreement, just because it's going to be unique enough that you're going to have a DA on almost all of them. So I would assume that in that development agreement process, you could talk about the different types of housing and how the mix goes and where they're situated and those kind of things. We met with a developer this morning that was, you know, just kind of thinking out loud and saying, you know, if we did, you know, maybe we have 8 phases, maybe our first 2 phases are all of this product. But knowing that with the land use authority, we've done this whole other thing out here so that we front end load that. Front end loading to me is fine. I'm happy with front end loading the less expensive units. I'm not okay with back end loading them and having them say, oh, we'll build that in some, you know, no. Front end loading, yes. Back end loading, no. Does that answer that question? Okay, thank you. And yes, Cameron, there's one more question, but I can hang out if you want or come back.
There are a couple other bills to build off of this.
Okay.
So here's my request for the group, because we could stay here asking questions for 3 hours just on this bill alone and recognize it's still in the drafting phase. So my request, both for those online, because there are probably 10 questions online already, and in the room, is if you have follow-up questions, we want to hear them. So send them to us. We'll funnel them back to Steve and his team on the PTIF bill, and anticipate a bill will come out this week. And there's still 3 weeks of a lot of work to go between now and the finish line. So Steve, I just want to thank you for your collaborative approach. He took this job in the middle of December, and I was one of the first people to grab him. And yeah, he had the same like chuckle when I grabbed him. It's like, let's get to work, and was very clear, like, this is where our members are at. And he said, ultimately the goal here is to solve problems and be collaborative. And that has been reflected over the work over the last few weeks. So, you know, thank you so far. And anything else you want to add before we pivot here?
I just tried to feed my kids Brussels sprouts for a long time, and they spit them up long enough that I know force feeding people stuff doesn't really work.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. Again, if you have questions, send them our way. We'll be aggregating all of them. This is one tool. It's an optional tool in terms of the builder trying to access these dollars. And then there's the piece on the local government planning side. So this is tool number one. Tool number two is a tax increment tool that is also trying to get at creating the environment for first homes. Now, when you say what's a first home is the new term of art for a starter home, but a first home for some people may be their eternal home, and that's great. Ultimately, we're trying to get to affordable home ownership. This legislation, this draft legislation is in the process of being drafted. In fact, I have a drafting meeting with Ledge Research in just a few minutes on this bill. And this is going to be called the First Home Investment Zone. So you've got the PTIF bill and the First Home Investment Zone. The First Home Investment Zone is really trying to achieve two objectives. Objective number one is trying to facilitate medium density town centers where you have a mix of commercial and residential. And the second piece is trying to get to affordable home ownership units outside of the center. Again, it would be an optional tool. This would run through the HTRZ process, the Housing and Transit Reinvestment Zone process. So the HTRZ committee would be the final sign off. I'll speak about the HTRZ committee momentarily, but the HTRZ or the HTRZ bill, that's SB 208. So I'll come back to that momentarily. But the HTRZ committee would approve the city plan. And once that plan is approved, then the city would be able to collect a portion of the tax increment financing from the other tax entities to fund the infrastructure for the First Home Investment Zone. The proposal must include some minimum density requirements on local governments, the developable acreage piece, and then a significant percentage of the housing units have to be owner occupied and they have to be affordable. So again, trying to get to that affordable homeownership piece. But what makes this a little different than say a traditional RDA or CRA is that the density requirement in that medium density town center, you can actually achieve part of that density requirement by counting those affordable home ownership units outside of that center. So that's why there are these two pictures here. One is the center. This is in Holiday, where right now you've got a nice mixed use medium density center that has some commercial, has a grocery store, and has some housing units within that center. And then a mile away, you'd have say 8 units to the acre style affordable home ownership neighborhood. And the units in that neighborhood that have been upzoned, those units can count toward the medium density center as well. The goal trying to be to achieve affordable home ownership in both places, but particularly in those neighborhood areas. And then the tax increment financing helps pay for the infrastructure. So again, this bill is in the process of being drafted. We had hoped on Friday that both of these bills would be ready for LPC. They're not, but that's why we still wanted to give you an update on both of them so that as you're thinking about them and taking pictures of the slides and thoughts come up, you can let us know, because we will be bringing them back to you for a vote next week. From a staff recommendation perspective, we have been heavily involved in the negotiation and crafting of both of these bills. Because going back to my statement before Steve spoke, where we were in January was going down a path that looked very much like a land use preemption. And now the focus has been more around creating tools and incentives to try to get to more affordable home ownership. So we're positioned pending on both of them until we bring them back, but we are trying to work them to get to a point where we as an organization can say, yes, we support these tools and think these tools can make a difference. So let me pause there. Any questions about the First Home Investment Zone concept that I can try to answer? So the question from Corey Holdaway is, who's carrying the bill? It will likely go into one of the Commission on Housing Affordability bills. And remember, there are 3 of those: SB 168, which we presented to you last week, House Bill 465, and House Bill 476. I'm about to present on both of those now. So I don't think it'll be a standalone. I think it'll be added to one of those 3 bills. Councilmember, wait for the mic. Just How many do we have online today, Carson? 149 online and 130 plus in the room. That's awesome. So thank you everybody for taking time.
The question I have, Cam, is just we're trying to get this target of affordable housing. Is that based off target housing or moderate housing? And what I'm getting at is to get to, I'm in Davis County, the average mean income is so much. Are we trying to target someone that makes 120% of that, or someone that's 80% of that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Councilmember. And I'm glad you brought it up, because you'll notice right now the slide just says significant percentage must be owner occupied and percentage must be affordable, and then affordable is undefined. And that's because as we've been having these daily meetings, we've been looking at, should it be this definition or that definition? So Steve referenced a spreadsheet that we've all been using that breaks down the AMI for every city in the state and every county in the state, and what the housing cost would be in each of those jurisdictions at 80%, 100%, or 120% of AMI. We've also looked at a metric of the median house price at 80%, 100%, and 120% in all of those areas. So right now, it's still up in the air of what the affordability metric will be. Just like you heard Steve reference on the owner occupied side, this says a significant percentage must be owner occupied. We're still trying to figure out what's the right mechanism to ensure that these are owner occupied units, so that if everybody's stretching on the planning side, we get the outcome we want of affordable home ownership units. And I think Kate was the one who asked, or Councilmember Bradshaw asked the question about the deed restrictions. Yeah, that's been front and center of our conversation, as if there's a deed restriction component to either of these, who's responsible to manage it, how long, what are the details, and those pieces are still being negotiated. Any other conceptual questions on either of these two tools? Okay, in that case, let me come back then to this, the housing equation now as of 12:59, because I don't think any other bad bills have dropped in the 25 minutes since I last spoke. Modular housing plus the financing tools, including hit House Bill 13, plus the two update bills that I'm about to hit. As a reminder on House Bill 13, we are currently position pending on House Bill 13. House Bill 13 is the Representative Dunnigan's infrastructure district bill. That bill is in committee this afternoon in the Senate. It passed unanimously out of the House. So if we want to change our position from position pending to a position of neutrality, for example, now would be the time. Now would be the time to do that. If we want to continue position pending, we can stay at position pending. So we just. John, Liam, will you bring microphone to John? Okay. I was just going
to from Phil, looking at the amount of work and effort that Representative Dunnigan has put into this to address issues from cities, issues from special districts. He has worked tirelessly to try to meet as much as possible concerns that have been expressed. I would think that at a minimum, we should go to a neutral in the context of this is a person who has worked with us, and not just the person, his issues have been related to local government. He comes from local government, and there's big issues down the road here where he would be very important. I'm just being candid on that, but he has excelled in terms of reaching out on this. I believe neutral would be appropriate.
Thank you, John. And since last week, he has amended the bill again to try to address some city concerns that we've collectively raised around reporting.
And Sean Guzman, St. George City. I want to clarify, we're talking about the first sub.
Yeah, the current sub that would include the reporting language.
The current sub, including the reporting language. I agree with what John Hiskey just said. Representative Dunnigan has been very good to work with us throughout this process, and that's been extensive. And as you all know, a lot of times when we're working with a representative this hard or a senator, then we kind of buy into that bill because they've done it when they've made this much effort to make changes to satisfy us. And I think if that reporting requirement is put in the bill and the first sub, as I've read it, I think that at the very least, we should move to a neutral on this in recognition of all the efforts that he has made to accommodate us, and also the signal that he's made to that he's ready to still willing to work with us as we continue in the future. So I don't know if there's going to be any more discussion, but I would make a motion that we move to.
We don't need the motion now.
Oh, we don't need
when
it?
we get to the ratification at the
Okay.
end, that would be the switch.
Okay, that's when we'll make the motion then.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I've mentioned a couple of times the other Commission on Housing Affordability bill and the Land Use Task Force bill. Both of these bills are in committee tomorrow morning. And we have been, these bills were not ready last week. So they were position pending last week. Our recommendation as of now is to support both of these bills. House Bill 465 is Representative Stephen White's Commission on Housing Affordability bill. It makes a small change to the moderate income housing plan requirements around compliance, and says right now under state law, if a city wants to access the Transportation Investment Fund or the Transit Transportation Investment Fund, you have to be compliant with MIHP. It would extend that to the Outdoor Recreation Grant Program. It encourages the 3 state authorities, Point of the Mountain, SITLA, and Inland Port, to, in their areas, look for ways to increase housing supply, because that's outside of our jurisdiction. Make some modifications to CRA and RDAs around housing. And then there's some other pieces related to housing tax credits. We're still anticipating that there will be some modification in the parking space. We asked LPC 2 weeks ago, and you gave some really good feedback via Slido of what could be workable there, but that's still being deliberated on. And then with MIHP reports and data collection, this has been something that's come up during the course of the session. Carson, you just take 30 seconds and touch on this piece. This is not yet in the bill, but we've been working on this and anticipate it will be.
Yeah, thank you, Cam. So this is not our document. This was prepared by some cities in southwestern Salt Lake County, and there's a little bit of northern Utah County there too. So we, as we've talked about before, the data has been critical. And again, I thank all of you who've responded to the many surveys over the years. But we want to try to formalize it. And we think that one of the challenges we have is, even though we do our best to be diligent in preparing the data and compiling it, coming from an organization that works for cities, sometimes I think there's a concern just about the appearance of it. So one thought we've had is to try to make the data collection more robust. So collecting many of the same data points that we've been collecting from you, have that done through the moderate income housing plan process instead. So as you're filling out your report, we would be potentially adding some of these fields. So I'm just going to throw them up there. This is still very much in process. So please quickly take a look at this and see if these are things that your jurisdiction could or couldn't do, or if we're missing anything. And we welcome, come and find me afterwards if you have concerns about any of these, but we think most of your jurisdictions would be able to compile this, including the report. We had issues last year where there was a couple of questions added to the report administratively that were optional, but looked mandatory, or the form was just a little bit, read a little bit differently. So we're trying to clarify in statute what the additional reporting items would be. So again, if you're a moderate income housing plan city and you think there's absolutely no way that you can track these, please come and let me know as soon as possible so we can be aware of that and try to work through it. So I'll leave it up there for a second, but I just wanted to take your temperature on that.
Perfect. By take your temperature, it also means take a picture and share it with your staff back at City Hall and make sure that what's being discussed is workable for your city, because the data really has informed the policy discussion up here and was able to help shift some of the emphasis away from preemption, because we were able to fill that gap with our collected data. This would in turn take our collected data and make it a state requirement, but we think it better inform the dialogue going forward. But we haven't gotten to yes yet on these provisions because we wanted to confirm with this group. So check with your planning staff and let us know ideally by tomorrow. Okay, thank you, Carson. Then House Bill 476, staff recommendations to support this one as well. All of the topics that are on the screen on this slide and the next slide, we actually brought to LPC during the interim to get feedback on. So now this bill just reflects what we've already presented to you around subdivision phasing and development agreements, overpressure zone exemption, waterwise landscaping provisions, landings and setbacks, subdivision cleanup from last year's SB 174, sidewalk phasing, state coordinate system, and there are changes that are already coming, we know there. And then the annexation rewrite, which is not yet in this bill, but there will be some provisions added to the bill in the next few days. So again, our recommendation here is to support this bill, because with this bill and those Commission on Housing Affordability bills, there's been months of dialogue and back and forth on these bills. And we've brought most of these concepts back to LPC during the interim. So any questions in the housing space? Carson, if it's all right with you, I'm going to just skip to finish my slide so that I can step off and then you can come back to short-term rentals. But are there any questions anybody wants to bring up about any of the housing and land use related bills? Okay, House Bill 507. This is position pending. This just came out at the end of last week. Want to make sure this was on your radar. It deals with SWIP stormwater permits. So take a look at it. Make sure you take this one back to City Hall as well. We're still analyzing what it means. So this one's not for discussion. It's just for awareness. Carson's going to come back to these short-term rentals because I'm going to hit SB 208 and House Bill 430 and then exit stage right. So SB 208, I mentioned before the HTRZ process and how that has been the template for the first home investment zone concept. There is a cleanup bill around housing and transit reinvestment zones. That's SB 208. There are three components to it. One, making some changes to the housing percentage that's part of HTRZs. As a reminder, HTRZs are a city-initiated effort where if you have transit in your city, you're required by state law to do a station area plan. And then you have the option to pursue an HTRZ. And that HTRZ, if your plan meets certain criteria, then the HTRZ committee can approve it. And once it's approved, then you collect certain amounts of tax increment to pay for the infrastructure to facilitate that higher impact development. So this bill increases some of the housing requirements, including, even though it's not in there now, adding an owner occupancy requirement, modifies the but-for test, which is part of any sort of tax increment deal, but it's going to modify the but-for test, and it slightly modifies the HTRZ committee, which includes all of the taxing entities, but it would increase the state legislative participation by 2. The first home investment zone would plug into the HTRZ committee. That's the concept here, okay? So our recommendation is to support SB 208, recognizing there are going to be more amendments coming to that bill. The last bill I want to bring to your attention in the just general infrastructure space, and then I'll be done, is House Bill 430. We presented this last week because the bill had just come out last week. Representative Perucci's hosted several meetings since last Monday. The bill was scheduled for committee this afternoon. I think it's being postponed. One more hearing. What we're anticipating is that the language around reporting will continue. So a large public transit district, which is only UTA, but they're defined as a large public transit district, shall provide the accounting report to each city about the revenues generated and money spent. There would be an addition to the bill around the Transit Innovation Grant concept, which the league has supported through the UEOC process. And that could apply to the TTIF, which is state money, the fifth, which is the county imposed money that most counties have not yet imposed, only Utah and Summit counties have, or a percentage of the already imposed fourth quarter. And there are a few other moving pieces. So our staff recommendation, based on the work we did with the UEOC, is supportive of the innovation grants and then position pending on those other details as we're still working through them. And then we'll bring this bill back once those additional details have been finalized. Okay, any questions for me before I have to run to a drafting meeting? Okay, my last pitch is this. There will be that follow-up meeting on the SB 185. We've invited a few of you to stick around to talk through 185. I'll be back as fast as possible for that meeting. And then just know if you think things have moved fast the first 4 weeks, they're going to move at a furious pace. So stay on top of your nightly emails and watch for action alerts. Carson, I'll turn it back to you for short-term rental updates, and then to Justin for water and natural resources. So here is your short-term rental update. Okay, thanks.
All right, everybody's favorite topic. So there's been a couple bills proposed this year regarding short-term rentals. There's Most of them are not very substantive. They're more just technical fixes. There's one that we'll briefly discuss, but I think we have some pretty clear guidance from the short-term rental working group on it. So I'll give you a quick update on those, but wanted to briefly start with this article. This is a recent article in the Salt Lake Tribune highlighting the challenge that local governments have in trying to balance the needs for tourism and providing that resource with the need for more housing and how that disproportionately affects a lot of resort areas, and it makes economic development and planning for communities really difficult. So great article. I would encourage people to read it. And this, again, highlights our kind of longstanding concern on the issue. That statute not only does not empower local governments to address this, but current statute actually makes it more difficult to enforce your own ordinances and your own zoning. So that's just some context. Again, there's 3 bills that I'll mention today. HB 32, really highly technical language, just clarifying that short-term rental does not mean a car rental, but I've heard some questions about this bill. So just wanted to, the title is a little bit misleading. So I just wanted to recognize what that was. We're neutral on it, as it doesn't really have a big impact on local governments either way. House Bill 180, there's been a lot more dialogue on this. Representative Bennion has worked with a couple of stakeholders to try to enhance in her mind, the regulatory scheme for short-term rentals. So just really quickly on this, again, we've run this by the work group. What this bill does, as drafted, would require all local governments who to allow short-term rentals to have more robust business licensing requirements. So these might include, well, they must include designating a local contact. They would include having an educational component. So you'd have to identify a university or another resource for the business contact to comply with, and they'd have to be able to report that they and the owner have both done that education on short-term rental management. There'd be requirements on, let's see, maintenance. It would have to be you need telephone numbers designated, and then you would need, you'd only be able to permit short-term rentals that are in approved habitable homes. So this would exclude the glamping or the if somebody has like a pop-up or something where they might list as a short-term rental during the spring in some areas. So it would preclude those. The feedback we've gotten from our work group on the initial bill was that this would be kind of cumbersome, especially for some small rural communities who want to allow them but don't feel the need for robust business licensing, and to adopt that regulatory scheme would be costly and kind of challenging to navigate. We've met with the bill sponsor, and she's offered an amendment that would just say, if you do allow short-term rentals, and if you do have a business licensing program, then you'd be able to, or you must comply by those policies. And we've heard mixed feedback from the short-term rental working group. Some cities have said, you know what, this is pretty consistent with our current practice. It doesn't really create a problem for us. Other jurisdictions have said, this is still not exactly the way we want to manage our communities. So I think the feedback we've heard is still, we're generally opposed, but willing to keep working with the sponsor to see if there's kind of a happy medium here. This bill's garnered some concern from a lot of different organizations, some that we traditionally disagree with. So it's been kind of an interesting, different approach. So yeah, we're not asking for a different position today. This is what we have in the bill tracker, but just wanted to keep you apprised. The last one, SB 204, Condominium and Community Association Amendments from Senator Harper, prohibits HOAs from requiring short-term rental owners to use a specific operator or management service. It does not say the HOAs can't regulate short-term rentals, period. It just says you can't require them to use a specific service. This is aimed at I think mostly St. George, sorry, Sean, where a community might have, this is on our radar because some of those communities might enter into development agreements with the recognition that an approved operator, an organization who they know and trust would be the one operating short-term rentals and mitigate community impacts. So we haven't taken a position on that, still working on that bill, but just so that's on your radar as well. Lastly, Representative White has a RFA, request for appropriation, for short-term rental address verification. This would give resources to the tax commission to verify that based on addresses, short-term rental operators are actually collecting and remitting property tax, resort taxes. So that I think is number 63 on the BEDL, the Business and Economic Development Appropriations Committee recommendations. So I'm not sure that's going to go forward, but we've been supportive of that bill so far, or that appropriation so far. So just a quick update. I know it's a lot of information very quickly, but if you have any questions, please reach out to me. We'll continue to defer to the short-term rental work group for guidance on these policy items. I've been accused of speaking too fast, so if that was too fast, please let me know. Probably should just jump into gravel pits.
Yeah, let's jump into gravel pits. That sounds super fun. All right. So let's talk about a couple of bills. First, SB 172 protection area revisions, excuse me. This is the bill we spoke at length last week. So I want to give a couple of, I thought we fixed that slide, a couple of updates. One, we asked you to reach out to your senators, and many of you did. Thank you for that. They did not talk about this in a committee. They did not talk about this on the Senate floor. They went and talked about this in the Senate caucus, and the bill was pulled back from the Senate Economic Development Commission back to the Rules Committee. And if you track the legislative process, it is never a good thing for a bill, unless you don't like the bill, for the bill to go back to the Rules Committee. So it stalled out a little bit last week. Now this slide may be a little out of date. We heard the rumor last week from Senator Bramble himself that he was going to be the sponsor on this bill instead of Senator Hinkins. Today, we heard that may not be the case. And I mean, literally during this meeting, they don't know who the sponsor is going to be on this bill. Also not usually a good sign for a bill. And Senator Bramble has said he wants to reach out. He wants to sit down and talk about what this bill is. So this bill has stalled out a little bit. That's a good thing for us. We like that. But don't get too excited, because there is another bill that has dropped in the last week. HB 502, Critical Infrastructure and Mining. And this bill may actually be worse. So we'll read through it really quickly. It says local governments must allow gravel pit operations and mining as a permitted use or conditional use subject to certain standards. So preemption is the default here. Applies to all land that is less than 1,000 feet from any dwelling and 500 feet from a rail or highway. So some massive preemption problems here. Local governments are prohibited from restricting, prohibiting, or imposing conditions that unreasonably, is the language in the bill, limit gravel pit or mining operations. And this one is maybe even a better part. Local governments must provide utilities to gravel pit and mining operations. If they're within the entity's service area, the entity provides similar service within 2 miles of the entity's boundaries to a similar operation, etc. Gravel pit must pay reasonable costs, and you may charge an impact fee. This is a bad bill. Anyone disagree? Okay, bad bill. We don't like it. So here's where it's at right now. There's some county stuff here, but that's county, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. Lots of concerns with this bill. It is sitting in the Rules Committee right now. It has not been assigned out anywhere. It has not moved yet. So last week when I told you I need you to reach out to your senators right now, I don't need you to reach out to your senators right now. That may change very quickly, though. We have a couple minutes for anybody that wants to make any comments on this bill or questions on the bill. But we're opposed to this bill. This one is one we have a lot of concerns with. We've reached out to Representative Snyder to talk about it. I know Salt Lake County was meeting with him while we were in this meeting, so we'll look to see what their update is. But a problematic bill, we want to make sure everyone knows about it. Any other questions, comments? Over here, Seth has comment. Perfect.
By any other name is still a really bad. And this bill is even worse than the one we talked about last week. And I'm kind of disappointed that we don't have other people that we can talk to like we did last week. That was kind of fun. But this is even worse. And so if we had a high oppose last week, that's the same kind of tone I think we need to take as a group. This bill is even worse with a lot of the things that it's asking us to do.
Perfect. All right, I think with that, let's switch to Slido right now. So we do have a couple Slido questions on this, and this goes a little bit back to what we talked about earlier. That we're trying to figure out where to spend the political capital. How much do we How much is the question? Do we oppose this bill? So this is a similar question. So the first bill, SB 172, this is the bill from last week that we talked about, gravel pit protection extensions. For your city, is this a high priority oppose, a medium priority oppose, or a low priority oppose, or no level of opposition for your city? And I would tell you candidly, my concern with gravel pits bills is not everyone has a gravel pit. So some of you are less concerned than others, and that's okay. That being said, 502 allows gravel pits to start popping up pretty much anywhere. There are very little limitations on this. You may not have a gravel pit with 502, you may very soon, coming to a neighborhood near you. But so I am concerned, and this is part of why we want to gauge this, is a split membership on gravel pits gets problematic for us when we're fighting it. So Mayor, I know you got a comment here.
I was just gonna say, you may not have a gravel pit. Preemption, 100%. And again, you just got to put critical next to whatever they want to preempt next year. We should all care about it for that reason. One part of it requires you to go.
Yeah.
There's nothing like the free market.
We mentioned the utility fees, but yeah, you have to provide utilities for them. Yeah. 2 miles. Yeah. We're all in the gravel pit business now. All right, let's jump to the next one. So that's 172. Jumping over to 502, Carson. Do I hit it or do you have it? Okay, so to 502, this is the one we just talked about, the new bill. Conditional use, permitted use for gravel pits, and paying for, well, they have to pay for it, you provide the utilities. So again, high priority oppose, medium priority oppose, low priority oppose. Liam in the back, Max. We're going to take high as an extreme, yeah. We'll add extreme next time.
A quick question, and I apologize if you said this. Some of us have light industrial areas in our city, not currently a mining operation or gravel pit, but may have been in a previous lifetime. Would it apply to those? Is this a pre-existing condition or a pre-existing permit, or is it set new?
So it depends on the bill we're talking about. And I'm going to, Todd, correct me if I say anything wrong here. But I think under 172, previous claims could come into play. Under 502, doesn't really matter. Because of the requirements there, it could, I think, transition fairly easily. Is that right? Todd said yes, I got it right. All right, Sean, one more comment here, yeah.
Just question, and that is, if they're outside our electrical service utility area, are we required to extend utilities out to them, or is it the service area of the provider that has to extend it to them?
Todd, I saw you raise your hand. So language is ambiguous on that one.
So we'll be ambiguous in our approval then.
You can give them ambiguous utilities. Whatever that means. All right, just like the legislative session, we are going to rip through a lot of bills very quickly at the end.
Justin, can I ask one more question online?
You may, yeah.
A few people have asked why not reach out to your legislators now, HB 502.
That is a great question. The reason not to reach out to your legislators yet is because I don't know if this, I honestly don't know if this is going to move very far. It's in rules. It hasn't been assigned anywhere yet. I don't know if this is a shot across the bow bill or if this is a I'm serious bill. And I don't want to blow political capital reaching out to blow something up if we don't need to yet. So that's a great question. But yeah, that's the reason to not reach out quite yet.
If it's not,
they don't pay attention. Yeah. So yeah, great question. But until it's on a committee, we don't need to shoot at it. We're going to go meet with him. We're going to talk about it. We want everyone to be aware. It's just not time to shoot yet. Thank you for admitting that, Mike. I appreciate that. No. Then until it's on a committee, they're just not even looking at it.
Did you say how does
All right. Carson, can I just move back to the slides on here? Or just up here? Okay, perfect. All right, the other bill I want to give an update on is HB 280. This is another Casey Steiner bill. You remember he came a few weeks ago and talked about his bill that was going to impose the fee. It is now going to be a study. So there's going to be a study component to this now, studying both how a fee could be implemented and what that looks like. So we're suggesting we move to a neutral on this one because it's a study. It does not lay out, I know one of the questions before was, do we have a seat at the table? There's nothing in the bill that says League of Cities and Towns has a seat at the table on this one. That being said, I've talked to Water Resources and they've never once turned us down from being involved in any study or looking at anything. So I have no concerns that we won't be at the table on this one. So study on that one. Also, well done, people reaching out on it. Concerns were heard and changes were made. Taxes and fees, Roger. Let's have you come talk about taxes for a minute. So while Roger's walking up, two things we're talking about is SGR 2 is a constitutional amendment proposal and the accompanying language SBR 30 in the bill.
Property tax, or valuing property for property tax purposes, lives and dies on information. We got a lot of information when it comes to homes, residential property. We tend to not have as much information when it comes to commercial development or commercial property. For as long as I've been involved with the property tax arena, which is a long time, one of the main issues has been compelling a disclosure on commercial sales, which most states do, but that has been incredibly resisted by the commercial real estate community for years. One of the arguments has always been it would formulate the capacity to impose a real estate transfer tax, which is a perfectly legitimate tax, but doesn't exist in Utah. But it has always been, if you guarantee us we will not have to run the fear of a real estate transfer tax, we'll seriously talk about a disclosure law. Senator McKay has married these two together. And basically, SB 30 is a bill that would impose a disclosure law on commercial real estate. SJR 2 is a constitutional amendment which would prohibit a real estate transfer tax. So that's how they're put together. In essence, it's a, okay, industry, you said you would agree to this if it gave you protection from this. So that's the premise. I will say a real estate transfer tax is a perfectly legitimate tax. It can be debated, we can talk about its virtues, but my personal view is it has somewhere between 0 and 1% chance of ever being passed in the state. So in effect, it's a prohibition on that, and in return for getting disclosure of commercial real estate information, which improves the property tax system. It's long and short of it.
So we're monitoring this one. We don't have a position because the dialogue is ongoing. We just want to make everyone aware of what this was because we have had some questions on it. All right, infrastructure. Oh, that was quick on infrastructure. Look at that. Liam, do you want to come talk about this one? Liam is not just passing the mic. Yeah. He's going to talk. I can have the mic though.
They're going to regret letting me talk into a mic instead of just giving it to people. HB 335, the grants bill from Representative Val Peterson, it has quite a few problems. I listed them out and the line numbers there, so you could look at that if you want to take a look at it. But the big thing that it does is in that first one, where it limits who can receive a grant to those that are only in counties of the 3rd through 6th class, and then the entities within there. So if you're in a 1st or 2nd class county, which I look out and most of you are in a 1st or 2nd class county, at least in person here, you wouldn't be able to receive any grants that are subject to this chapter in the legislation there. So it does that. It does make clear what's not a grant in there, because that was a concern, something that we were talking about as well. So it's not any of the federal money or loans or public assistance rebates or anything like that. But yeah, we're still working with Representative Peterson on that one. I know GOPB has been working closely with him too, trying to work out some of those kinks. But yeah, our staff recommendation is definitely opposed to this one. Right now, it does say the only grants that are subject to this chapter are the ones that they explicitly say are subject to this chapter. But we, of course, envision in the future them making future grants all subject to this. And anytime they might go back and do some amendments to a grant that might be in statute, they might do the same thing and make it subject to it. So just bringing this to your attention, and that's all I've got to say on it. Oh yeah, yeah. It's on the House floor. It's pretty far down. It's like 70 something. So it'll take a little bit to get there, but yeah, that's something we're definitely opposed to. I don't know what our government relations director has to say about it though.
So this is one that, again, we're not asking you to shoot it right now, although I won't tell you to not. Reach out to you one more time. I'm not saying you have to send anything right now, but if you feel like sending something and saying you're concerned about it, getting this on their radar, that's great. As it gets closer to a vote on the House floor, if there are not significant changes, we'll be asking you to reach out with concerns about this one. Oh, this one's fun. HB 49, Party Affiliation Disclosure Amendments. This one allows a municipal candidate, is what I should have put on here, but allows a candidate, so if you're elected, it applies to you right now, to have their party affiliation included on the ballot. It doesn't say they all have to be listed on the ballot. It says you may opt to have your party. Oh, we're done. Say whatever you want now. Allows a candidate to have their party affiliation included on the ballot. So you must be a member of the party. You can't pick another party to have included on the ballot. And the candidate position, it remains a nonpartisan process. Nothing changes. But this bill, I know, I'm just telling you what the bill says. But you can opt to have it on. So our staff recommendation is to oppose this when it's drafted, but would be willing to hear any discussion or thoughts on this bill. When you talk about Yep, agreed. If you're unaffiliated, I heard some. If you're unaffiliated, then that's a good question. I have to reread the bill to see if it contemplates that. But I don't know that it contemplates putting that on the ballot. I think it just said party affiliation. So that's a good question. Yeah, right here. Okay. So yeah, again, our plan is to oppose. If you feel differently and you don't want to say in here, feel free to come talk to us. But that's where we're planning on going with this one. And scenic byway. Okay, so I know many of you have received letters, emails, texts about the scenic byway. So just want to mention what the bill does as currently drafted. We've talked about this one in a couple different committees. As currently drafted, it maintains the current makeup of the Utah Scenic Byway Committee. So we have one appointee as the league. We have one appointee that is on the Utah Scenic Byway Committee. We don't have 10, we don't have 14, we have one. 3 local electeds is what we've got in there. The legislature would give final approval to the recommendations from the Committee for Scenic Byway Designations. As the current standard, as is current, some of these already come back to the legislature, some of them do not. But as it is right now, it keeps the Scenic Byway Committee as it is. If this bill doesn't pass, or if he doesn't change it, then the Scenic Byway Committee just goes away. It sunsets, it's done. So there is legislation needed to keep the Scenic Byway Committee at all. And what Senator Harper is going with is this current makeup. We haven't gotten too involved with it. We've had some conversations with Senator Harper about it. But I know some of you have received emails, phone calls, information about this. We just want to kind of give you the state of what the bill is at right now. So there it is. Happy to take questions or comments on that one too. Yeah. Oh, Sean's got one.
Sean Guzman, St. George. Receiving. Under the current makeup, required to go to the legislature to get the final approval on the recommendation?
Depending on the type of committee, yes. Or a type of highway, yes. Not all of them, but some of them. There are some that the Scenic Byway Committee can approve.
Okay, so just so you all know, those that are opposed to this is that they were glad to see the removal of the outdoor advertising industry as one of the seats. But what they're saying is they're asserting that the legislature has to give final approval for all recommendations, because that then gives the industry the ability to come back and lobby the full legislature against the designation. All that's happening is they gave up a seat only to use their clout to come any designation they don't like. So I do want you to understand that that's what's going on here. And on the other hand, as Justin said, it's going to sunset. So it either sunsets or it continues in this configuration and come back and lobby against all recommendations that come out of this committee.
And the other piece I'll add to that is well, I won't put my finger on the scale, but this is also part of the grand calculus and political capital. How high does this rise in the battles we're fighting? Is if someone makes a motion that we want to oppose this and fight hard, then you've also got to make the case about where we spend our time on certain things. So that's kind of where we're bringing this one up, just to let people know where it's at. And yeah, good comments from Sean. Not that there aren't always good comments from Sean, but those were. Yeah. If this legislation does not pass, it sunsets this year. It's done. All right. Some quick ones just to bring up. These are other ones that we're in conversations with. Just want to make you aware that we are in conversations on this week. HB 396 by Representative Brammer, SB 150, and HB 460. These all deal with exercise of religion in the workplace. Yes, we're engaging on these. Yes, we're working on them. We're waiting to see what comes out of them. So we haven't brought it for a position yet because they're in transition. They keep changing. So we don't want to take any position until we see what we're getting on these. But yes, for anyone who's asked, we are watching these ones. And then the last one, just want to put on your radar. We talked about it a couple times, but the data privacy bill that's coming from Jefferson Moss. Language is also in transition. It also is a bit of a moving target, but another one that we're aware of that we're engaging on. But until we see some more solid language, haven't really worried about bringing it back for a position yet. So with that, happy to take any other questions, motions, but Mayor, I think we're about at the ratification part. Nothing on homelessness this week, yeah. Nope.
It's early. Right. All right, this is any other comments? Are you ready to make a motion?
Yes, and I want to go back to the earlier comments from our elder Hiskey. HB 13, Dunnigan infrastructure.
All right, so the motion is we take a neutral position on Representative Dunnigan's infrastructure bill as part of our ratification of the bill tracker.
Just add the inclusion of language on the reporting requirement.
Including reporting requirement.
All right, so the motion is neutral position on Dunnigan's bill, first sub with the reporting requirement as part of the bill tracker. Is there a second? All right, got a second for that. All right, then is there a motion to approve the bill tracker as presented? With that.
With 13, yeah.
Right. Including that amendment, is there a motion to approve the bill tracker? All right, second. All right, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right, none. Motion to adjourn? All right, all in favor of adjournment, say aye. All right. Any opposed?
Stay here forever.